The rejection had come on
It's
Christmas
all
Eve,
right.
which in retrospect seemed like
That's
it was
her?
designed to maximize emotional
her.
impact, though Kaesung Park suspected his family simply had not considered that timing at all. They had simply wanted to deliver the message during the holiday gathering, when refusing to acknowledge Amelia was most visually obvious, most publicly humiliating, most thoroughly devastating. Kaesung was 48, had built himself from street-level distributor to one of Boston's most powerful organized crime figures. He controlled operations across New England, managed money laundering through legitimate businesses, maintained the kind of power that made local politicians nervous and federal law enforcement frustrated. He had achieved everything his family had wanted for him when they had immigrated from South Korea to America: wealth, status, power. He had then married Amelia, which apparently invalidated every other achievement in their eyes. Amelia was 35, black, had been born in Boston to a mother who was a social worker and a father who had been a high school principal before he died. She was a pediatrician, specialized in working with underserved communities, had built a career focused on providing healthcare to children who otherwise would not have access to it. She was accomplished, intelligent, kind, and, according to Kaesung's family, completely unsuitable as his wife. They had married 5 years earlier, quietly, without family involvement. Kaesung had made the choice to keep his mother and brothers out of his personal life specifically because he had known their response would be negative. He had wanted to build his marriage without their interference, without their judgment, without their ability to damage what he had found with Amelia. But 5 years of hiding had created tension. Amelia had asked repeatedly to meet his family. She had wanted to be integrated into his life completely, not just the hidden, private portions of it. She had wanted to build a family that included his relatives, wanted to create traditions that included both sides of their heritage. He had eventually relented. The Christmas Eve dinner had seemed like a safe venue. Family gatherings, festive atmosphere, the kind of environment where people were supposedly more generous and more open to connection. He had been catastrophically wrong. His mother had been cold from the moment Amelia arrived. His older brother had asked, within the first 5 minutes, whether Amelia had any other family besides her mother. His younger brother had spent the entire evening making comments that were ostensibly jokes, but were actually just racism wrapped in humorous language. His sister-in-law had been the worst, had spent the dinner asking probing questions about Amelia's background, her education, her family's financial status, as though those things somehow determined whether she was worthy of being married to someone like Kaesung. The actual rejection had come during dessert. Kaesung's mother had stood up, an unusual move at a family dinner, and had addressed the room directly. "I want to speak plainly about something that has been difficult for me to articulate. My son has made a choice that I do not believe serves his best interests or the interests of our family. Marrying outside of our community, outside of our culture, outside of our understanding of what constitutes an appropriate partnership, this is not acceptable to me." Amelia had set down her fork. Kaesung had felt something shift in the room. "I am asking you, Kaesung, to reconsider this marriage. You have allowed yourself to be distracted by infatuation with someone who is fundamentally incompatible with you. I am asking you to choose your family, your culture, your future, all of which require a partner who understands our world and our values." She had paused, and then she had looked directly at Amelia. "And I am asking you to remove yourself from this situation. You do not belong here. You cannot understand what it means to be part of this family. You will never be truly accepted. The kindest thing you could do is leave my son to build a life with someone appropriate." The room had been completely silent. Amelia had not cried. She had not become defensive. She had simply stood up, had excused herself, and had gone to gather her coat. Kaesung had followed her. "Do not do this. Do not let them push you out. This is not your fault. This is their prejudice, their narrowness, their inability to accept that the world is more complex than their limited understanding. Your mother is your mother. Your family is your family. I will not be the cause of you losing them. But I also will not sit in a room where I am told that my existence is a mistake, that my presence is an insult, that my love for you is somehow inappropriate because of the color of my skin. Then come with me. Leave them. Choose us over them. That is not fair to ask. These are your people. These are the connections you have. I will not ask you to sacrifice them." She had left. He had watched her drive away from his family's mansion, had watched the taillights disappear into the Boston night, and had understood that his family had forced him to choose, explicitly, dramatically, in a way that did not allow for compromise or for attempting to maintain both relationships. He had returned to the dinner table. His mother was still standing, apparently expecting congratulations or affirmation for having successfully eliminated the problem. She is gone. She has chosen to remove herself. This is for the best. Kaisung had stood up. You are all choosing to remain in this room. I am choosing to leave. And I am choosing to rebuild my life with the woman you just rejected. If that means losing you, losing my brothers, losing the connection to my family, then I accept that consequence. But I will not accept that there is something wrong with loving someone whose skin is darker than mine. I will not accept that my wife is unsuitable because you are uncomfortable with difference. And I will not spend the rest of my life trying to convince people who are fundamentally committed to racism that they should accept me. He had left the mansion and had driven directly to Amelia's apartment. She had been in shock, had not expected him to leave his family gathering, had been trying to process the catastrophe of having been rejected by her husband's family in such explicit terms. I am choosing you, he had said simply. I am choosing us. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you understand that my family's judgment is irrelevant to my assessment of you. You are my wife. You are my future. And I will never allow anyone, including my family, to make you feel otherwise. What had followed was transformation of a different kind than Amelia had experienced. Kaisung had used his resources and his power to build a life for Amelia that was so visibly elevated, so obviously successful, so thoroughly integrated with his actual life that there was no question about her status or her position. He had purchased a mansion in Boston's most exclusive neighborhood, not to hide, but to live openly, to create a space that reflected their life together, to establish himself and his wife as a unit that was undeniably powerful and undeniably legitimate. He had introduced her to his business associates, had made clear that she was not a wife to be hidden but a partner to be respected, had created a situation where people wanted to know Amelia, where rejecting her would mean rejecting him. He had supported her pediatric practice, had provided resources that allowed her to expand her work with underserved communities, had made sure that her professional accomplishments were acknowledged and celebrated. And he had done something that surprised many people who knew him. He had begun the process of restructuring his criminal organization to create legitimate operations that Amelia could be proud of. Not immediately, not completely, but systematically, deliberately. He had reduced the most obviously exploitative aspects of his business, had shifted toward operations that generated wealth without requiring the explicit victimization of vulnerable populations. Why are you doing this? His lieutenant had asked him. Because my wife has spent her entire life trying to help people. And I do not want the woman I love to be ashamed of the way I make my money. I do not want her to have to justify being married to someone who exploits others. I want her to be able to love me without moral compromise. 1 year after his family had rejected Amelia, Kaisung received a call from his mother. I would like to speak with you. I would like to discuss reconciliation. He had met with her in a neutral location, a restaurant, not at the family mansion, not at his home. He had not brought Amelia. He had made it clear that there were conditions to any reconciliation. Amelia is my wife. She is not negotiable. If you want a relationship with me, you accept her completely. You do not tolerate her. You do not accept her reluctantly. You acknowledge that she belongs in my life and that any rejection of her is rejection of me. His mother had cried, had explained that she had realized her mistake, that she had been afraid, that she had not known how to accept something that contradicted her understanding of how the world should work. I cannot undo what I said to her. I cannot undo the pain I caused. But I am asking for the opportunity to rebuild. I am asking for the opportunity to know my daughter-in-law, to understand her, to build a genuine relationship with her. That is her decision. I will tell her that you have reached out. But the relationship between you will be based on whether she is willing to trust you, whether she believes you are genuinely changed, not on whether I think you deserve another chance. He had told Amelia about the conversation. And Amelia, who was kinder than he believed he deserved, had agreed to meet with his mother. The reconciliation process had taken years. It had required genuine transformation on his mother's part. requiring her to examine her own prejudices, to acknowledge the harm she had caused, to demonstrate through consistent action that she had changed, not just through words. But gradually, the relationship had been rebuilt. His mother had come to genuinely love Amelia, had come to acknowledge that her initial rejection had been based on prejudice rather than on any actual assessment of Amelia's character. 5 years after the Christmas Eve rejection, Kaisung and Amelia hosted a large party at their mansion, a celebration of their 10 years together, a statement of their unity and their power. His family attended. His mother came and spent significant time with Amelia, treating her with obvious affection and genuine respect. His brothers came and acknowledged their sister-in-law as someone worthy of being part of their family. Even his sister-in-law came, looking uncomfortable but present, acknowledging through her presence that she had been wrong. The party was held at the mansion that had become the symbol of Amelia's elevation from rejected outsider to celebrated queen. The guest list included business associates, political figures, celebrities, philanthropists. People who had come to know and respect Amelia through her work with underserved communities, people who understood that Amelia was not Kaisung's wife, but rather was Kaisung's partner in a genuinely equal relationship. During the party, Kaisung made a speech. 10 years ago, I married a woman who was rejected by my family because of the color of her skin, because of their inability to accept difference, because of their commitment to a narrow understanding of what constituted an appropriate partnership. My family's rejection of her was a rejection of me, of my judgment, of my right to make my own choices. He paused, looking directly at his mother. I chose my wife. I chose her completely, and without reservation. And I spent the next 5 years building a life that proved their judgment was wrong. I built a life that elevated her not as a trophy, but as a recognition of who she actually is. A brilliant physician, a dedicated advocate for vulnerable children, a woman of integrity and intelligence and grace. He took Amelia's hand. What I want my family to understand, what I want everyone in this room to understand, is that rejecting someone based on race is not a family value. It is racism. And I will never accept racism dressed up as family loyalty, as cultural protection, as preservation of tradition. Amelia is my wife. She is my partner. She is the woman I choose every single day. And anyone who cannot respect that does not have a place in my life. The room was completely silent. Later in the evening, his mother approached Amelia privately. I want to apologize again. I want to acknowledge that my rejection of you was one of the worst decisions of my life. I want to tell you that I have come to love you not because my son forced me to, but because I have come to genuinely know you and to understand who you are. I want to ask your forgiveness. Amelia had hugged her. I forgive you. I forgive you not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your past prejudice. And because I believe you have genuinely changed. But I also want you to understand that your change is not complete. Acknowledging your mistake is only the beginning. The real work is in continuing to examine your own biases, in continuing to challenge the ways you were taught to think about race, in continuing to build genuine relationships with people who are different from you. 10 years after the rejection, Kaisung had essentially completely extracted himself from the most destructive aspects of his criminal organization. Not because Amelia had demanded it, but because he had come to understand that his power meant nothing if it was built on the exploitation of vulnerable people. He had come to understand that the most impressive life he could build was one in which he genuinely supported the work of someone like Amelia, work that actually improved people's lives rather than destroying them. He had legitimate business interests, real estate, technology, finance. He had built an organization that generated wealth without requiring exploitation. And he had built a marriage that was genuinely equal, genuinely respectful, genuinely powerful. When people asked Amelia how she had survived the rejection by Kaisung's family, her answer was always the same. I survived because the man I married chose me completely. He did not ask me to understand his family's prejudice. He did not ask me to accept their racism as family tradition. He did not ask me to compromise my dignity or my self-respect to maintain relationships that were fundamentally toxic. Instead, he chose me. And he spent the next decade building a life that proved everyone who had rejected me wrong.
She paused.
What I want other women to understand is that being rejected by your partner's family because of your race is not something you need to accept or to work to fix. It is a reflection of their prejudice, not a reflection of your worth. And